Welcome to today's Global Connections program. I'm Bill Miller. What is the culture of peace? What can the United Nations do to promote peace as well as economic and social development and encourage human rights around the world? We'll be back in just a moment to talk about these and other important issues. Welcome back to our program. Today we're going to take a look at why it is so important for the United Nations and other groups to focus on peace, economic and social development, and human rights. My guest today is an expert on all of these issues. My guest today is Ambassador Anwarul Chowdhrury. Ambassador Chowdhrury was the permanent representative of Bangladesh to the United Nations in New York from 1996 to 2001, and he served as the Undersecretary General and High Representative of the United Nations responsible for the most vulnerable countries of the world from 2002 to 2007. Ambassador Chowdhrury, welcome to today's Global Connections program. It's a pleasure to have you here, and I'm greatly appreciative. I want to ask you right off at the start, what is the culture of peace? We've heard about that, and it is so important, but when did it start? Why did it start?
Well, happy to be here. And let me say that as we all know, peace is the eternal quest for humanity. We have been looking for peace, searching for peace for such a long time. After the end of the Cold War, when the world was very energized to feel that this is the time for us to move and get our long desired peace. So we thought that the approaches to peace by the United Nations has not given us the desired result. How to change the mindset of people to prepare themselves for peace and as well as contribute to peace. And that is when the philosophy of the culture of peace came up, that peace has to be made a part of our existence, daily existence. We have to understand that peace is not just stopping war. Peace is much more than that. And how we can meet the challenges of our lives through peaceful and non-violent and non-aggressive way. That is when the United Nations started looking at it. In 1997, in the month of July, I wrote to then Secretary General Kofi Annan asking for a separate item of agenda in the General Assembly titled Culture of Peace. And that is when the United Nations started giving it a very high level focus. As a matter of fact, General Assembly being the highest body of the UN system started focusing on that in their plenary meetings. And we had General Assembly declare 2000 as the International Year of the Culture of Peace. Then 2001 to 2010 was declared as the International Decade for the Culture of Peace and Non-Violence for the Children of the World. And then we adopted in 1999 a program of action and a declaration on the culture of peace. All these things have contributed in a tremendous way to the work of the United Nations and to the work of international community. How the future of peace should be structured, whereby each one of us become an agent of peace.
Exactly. And one other ancillary activity is the International Day of Peace, declared by the United Nations General Assembly, and September 21st is that day. Why is that important? We should be trying to achieve peace all 365 days of the year, but why is it important to focus on one day faith-based groups, the United Nations agencies, businesses, the general public, what can we do on September 21st to really focus on trying to achieve world peace?
As a matter of fact, when the initiative was made in the 80s, there were not many days focused on issues which relate to peace or the culture of peace. And at that time, it was felt that the opening day of the General Assembly should be the International Day of Peace. But finally, General Assembly decided to fix a date to observe that, and it is being done now globally by nations, by communities, by international organizations, and particularly by the educational institutions. And the focus of the observance at the headquarters level of the United Nations is on the young people. When the young groups or individuals from various parts of the world come to New York to sit together, to exchange their ideas about how peace can be achieved, how their communities can develop, all these things. So the basic focus of these days is on the young people talking and practicing peace in their own lives, talking about peace and practicing peace in their lives. Basic theme of this day is a day of ceasefire and nonviolence. And that is what we are trying every day of the year to achieve. But that year becomes a prominent day when everybody thinks very seriously about that.
Exactly. We hope they do. Excuse me. We encourage them to do that. The United Nations has 193 member states. They're independent states, obviously countries of the world. The United Nations is not a one world government. It brings a collection of these countries together to work on international problems such as peace and security or human rights, whatever it might be. But we have a situation too where we, the individual, is in most cases, we are members of a particular country. We're citizens of Bangladesh or the United States or Mexico or wherever it might be. But we're also global citizens, are we not? Because we have an interest in trying to deal with these global problems such as climate change or perhaps other problems such as human trafficking or with inequities, inequalities, violations of human rights, whatever they may be. But we're really global citizens to a large degree, are we not? I mean, we can be citizens of country X, but we still have to look upon the world as one big body, 7.3 billion people on it, and work towards common goals. Is that correct?
Absolutely correct. Because in today's globalized, interconnected, interdependent world, the best interest of humanity is better served if we think ourselves as global citizens. We have to understand that whatever we do, even as individual person, it has an impact, and we do not know which part of the world or on the humanity as a whole. So this is very important as the young of today and those who are seniors making decisions, taking decisions on behalf of all of us, should think themselves as global citizens. That we should be aware that my action today and here can have a negative impact in the other parts of the world. So we have to think of ourselves, to use the cliche, a global village. Our world is a global village where no member of that village can live all by himself or herself.
And in this global village, there's probably no other issue more important than climate change that affects all of us. We can't escape the climate. We're here, and we have to work on this problem together. There are obviously many problems being dealt with by the United Nations, by individual countries, by different groups. One area is with women, and not that women are a problem, it's just that women are not treated equally in many cases. You when you were at the United Nations, were very instrumental in working with the Security Council and other organs within the United Nations to promote women's rights, promote equality for women, gender equality, and that type of thing. And I believe it was Security Council Resolution 1325 that you were involved in. What exactly was Security Council Resolution 1325, and what did it do?
I will recall that day, 8th of March in 2000. That is the International Women's Day. At that time, I was the president of the Security Council, and I had initiated a move to have the Security Council adopt a resolution which will recognize the positive role and contribution of women to the structuring of peace and security. All these 55 years before that time, the Security Council recognized women only as victims of war and refugee situations or conflicts. Never they recognized that women have played and continue to play a very important role in peace building and structuring a sustainable peace as the countries come out of conflict. And that effort was not possible, but we could agree on a statement of the Security Council which broke the conceptual and political barrier to the acceptance of the point that peace is inextricably linked with equality between women and men. And that is the essence. Now, after 14 years, that resolution 1325, which was adopted later, 8 months later, in October 2000. That resolution has energized particularly civil society. They have organized themselves, particularly women's organizations, and they have done wonderfully well. The resolution also requires member states to prepare a national action plan, how they want to implement the basic objective of 1325, which is to ensure equality of participation at all decision-making levels between women and men. And it's a big disappointment that out of 193 member states, only 47 have prepared their national action plan after 14 years. So we are now energizing our efforts to see how best we can increase that number drastically by next year's 15th anniversary of 1325. Next year means 2015 will be the 15th anniversary of that resolution. And we need to do much better, much more to ensure that women are treated equally at all levels. And I say at all times.
Exactly. Excuse me, I've got a little dust here. Our viewers can go to un.org, www.un.org, to learn more about what we're talking about today and other issues we're going to be talking about for the rest of the program. When we look at the role of women and how important they are critical in every society. They're not treated equally or treated the same in every society, and in most societies, or many societies, they're discriminated against, but they play such a critical role. And after 1325, you saw that the United Nations has brought in, I believe, more women into the system. Their programs focus more on women's activities, focusing on trying to overcome gender inequalities, different things like that, to help women to improve their situation in life, to achieve their full potential. Even if you look at UN peacekeeping, today you find women peacekeepers or police officers in most cases, and I think Liberia was the first country that had a contingent of Indian women peacekeepers. But that is a critical change, is it not, in the UN system and in other parts of the UN system and around in other areas too?
Well, I will say change, but such a natural change. I mean, my own country, Bangladesh, has provided police contingents, military contingents of all women. But I believe that we should focus on different dimensions of equality. That equality is to ensure that the contribution of women make peace much more sustainable. So the objective is to not make war safe for women, but to abolish war forever. And that is our objectives. And this is, and I also would like to add to the comment you made. I think no country in the world can claim that women of that country has full equality in the real sense, all places. So the challenges to women's equality keeps mutating. And that is what today we get voting rights, we get equality in terms of law, but are women safe in those countries? Not yet. So this is the biggest challenge that UN faces, have to be up to date, and all countries, all member states should commit 100%. And I would like to add here, and it will apply to every issue before the United Nations. The Declaration on the Culture of Peace of the UN identified 5 major actors, starting with the government, of course. Then it starts with civil society. Second one is civil society. Third one is the media. And here comes in the role of public information and the mass media. And the fourth one is individuals. People belonging to any profession can contribute to the culture of peace. And particularly faith-based organizations, religious groups, professionals, and then the fifth, of course, most important, the United Nations. All these have a special role in energizing the agenda for the culture of peace, women's equality, global development, economic and social issues in every way.
Well, you're watching Global Connections Television, which is an independently produced program. The opinions expressed on Global Connections are solely those of the moderator and his guest. You, as a viewer, are invited and encouraged to go to our website at www.globalconnectionstelevision.com to view previous programs and also to comment on this program or others. And if you would like, please make suggestions as to future topics and speakers. Today we're focusing on the concept of peace, economic and social development, and human rights. And my guest today is an expert on all three. My guest today is Ambassador Anwarul Chowdhrury. Ambassador Chowdhury served as ambassador and permanent representative of Bangladesh to the United Nations in New York from 1996 to 2001, and as Undersecretary General and High Representative of the United Nations, responsible for the most vulnerable countries of the world from 2002 to 2007. Ambassador Chowdhury, we're talking about women, and they are so critical. And you're right, there's no country that has perfect equality. You're absolutely correct on that. How important is it for the United Nations, and the UN is the epicenter for most of these issues. The general public, because of lack of media coverage, may not realize that, but it's the truth. If you look at all of the international issues we're dealing with, they are being dealt with at the United Nations. The UN brings in key leaders from the private sector, the public sector, non-governmental organizations, the general public. But how important are the UN conferences such as the Women's Conference, Beijing 1995, and the Beijing Plus 20 conference coming up shortly? How important are these to focus attention, put the spotlight on issues and problems affecting women and many other areas too, like climate change and what have you? But how important a role can the UN play in this respect?
UN has been playing a most critical role in human history to get people together, to work for our common cause, and to make the lives of the peoples of this world much better than what it had been in the past. And that endeavor continues because challenges keep on manifesting in various different ways. But I believe that UN has the best and most credible convening power to bring parties together, to bring nations, individuals, groups together, to work for the best interest of humanity. And I always carry with me 4 little booklets which tells me and energizes me to keep working for the common efforts of the United Nations. And the number one is, of course, the Charter of the United Nations. I believe that this is the most important document for humanity. And then I carry with me the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, which is also equally important. Then I carry with me the Convention on the Elimination of All Forms of Discrimination Against Women. I believe that this talks about not only the 50% of humanity, but something which will lift the humanity for a better future. And this is a very important thing to bear in mind. And of course, my dearest, the Program of Action on Culture of Peace. And I believe that this is the future of the world, where each one of us will be peaceful and non-aggressive in our behavior, to not only with regard to global issues, but with regard to national, local, community-related and individual issues. So that is how I believe that UN is contributing to improvement of the quality of life of millions of people around the world. Many judge the United Nations only by its failure to resolve political problems, but they do not know how United Nations has improved the conditions, economic and social conditions in the world, human rights conditions in the world. They have set up norms which guide human interaction in a wonderful and in a most comprehensive manner. Every aspect of my country's life in Bangladesh has been touched positively by the United Nations when it emerged out of its independence war in 1971. Since then till now, United Nations has been a major partner of all the countries, particularly the developing countries and the least developed countries, which have really benefited from this organization.
Exactly. And we're just about out of time, but you've just about answered this question. In the last 30 seconds or so we hear that people question, is the United Nations relevant today? In 1945, some people argue it was more relevant. Is it relevant today, given this very complex world we live in?
I believe if in 1945 UN was relevant, today it is the most essential, the most relevant organization that is needed for our sort of diverse world, I think, and diversity of the challenges that we are facing. United Nations is essential, relevant, and absolutely needed if humanity wants to move ahead as a global citizen.
Exactly. And we read about the United Nations with the peacekeeping, the 16 peacekeeping operations. We read about the Security Council, the General Assembly in particular. Brings the leaders of the world together to focus on these problems that we've been talking about today and many others that we have not. We see that the United Nations is on the ground in Syria to provide food, the World Food Program. You have the United Nations High Commission for Human Rights, High Commission for Refugees. These are people that are on the front lines in many dangerous areas of the world, providing assistance to people who are in dire need. And of course, we think, well, maybe the UN doesn't touch our lives. But when you think about UN agencies that help to move aircraft, ships, mail, and weather information around the world, and to keep terrorists off of airplanes, or to keep pirates off of ships, or to make sure that aircraft don't crash into one another in international airspace, we stop and we think the United Nations really does touch our lives. The United Nations is not perfect.
Absolutely.
Nobody will argue that, I don't believe, but it's the only institution that brings together the 193 countries of the world together to focus on these problems. And as many people have said over the years, if the UN did not exist today, we would have to recreate it tomorrow because of a modern technological world that we're living in, a high-tech world. We cannot get by without it, and it's absolutely critical to have the United Nations. But Ambassador Anwarul Chowdhrury, I want to thank you so very much for a very interesting and a very informative program.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
I'm Bill Miller. Thank you for joining us on today's Global Connections program.